everybody, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be playing a game called Spell Saga. This game has two decks available so far. The first one is called the Highlands, that's what I'll be showing today, and the second one is called the Forest. And these are part of a planned trilogy. I think the final one, the Caves, is coming out either at the end of this year or sometime at the beginning of next year. But yeah, you start with the Highlands. Your character and all the equipment you have there will progress into the forest if you survive, and then I suppose you'll go into part 3 and eventually kind of finish your story. This is an entirely card-driven game. This is all you get, although you do maybe want to provide your own counters for your guys. So I've got a little totally anachronistic Space Marine figure here for the main character. And it's got a really fascinating setting. It's basically kind of a post-apocalyptic setting, but a fantasy post-apocalypse. You're this last musician, and in this world, musicians kind of have magical power, which is one of the first things that attracted me to the game. It reminded me of Quoth, or Quoth, I forget how to say it, in the Name of the Wind series. And you're trying to find out what happened to all the rest of the minstrels, all the rest of these magical musicians, and figure out how to kind of save the world from whatever catastrophe is striking it. Now, as you'll see on the boxes, the game is described as a tabletop novel, and I think that gives the wrong impression. When I heard that, I thought it would be like the kind of thing where I'm reading paragraphs and everything is very linear. But actually, the game plays a bit more like a roguelike, where I'm investigating and finding things and plays out very differently each time. Now, to that point, I'm going to show you the beginning of a Highlands playthrough, but I'm not going to do the entire thing because, while there are different ways to progress to the forest, some different paths you can find, I don't want to give away too many of kind of the spoilers of what you'll see. Now, I've played just the Highlands 5 or 6 times, and different stuff has happened every time. I've gotten different items and encountered different things each time. But I do think some of the fun of the game is kind of investigating and discovering the things that it has to offer, and I don't want to spoil too much of that. So again, this will be a partial playthrough of the Highlands. If you like the game, check it out. I'll put a link to where you can purchase it in the description, and you can see what else the game has to offer for yourself. Now, the game does set up the same way each time, so you're going to start with the single story card. I'll read the text here, and this is kind of a bit more of like an expressionistic story. I don't feel like it's extremely linear, but I kind of enjoy that about it. When the world ended, all that was left was missing or broken. Broken hearts and broken roads, missing loves and lost purpose. It was the musicians who left to search for clues. The minstrels and bards with their magical songs, riding off into the sunset to seek out a miracle. But that was long ago. Now there is one last minstrel searching for answers, searching for hope. So story cards are interesting. You're going to gain them into your little story area. And these are kind of I don't want to say the timer for the game, but as you get more story cards, you can do more stuff, but also you're in more danger. So it's almost like the importance of the story that you're living, which is kind of an abstract concept that I enjoy. So as you add story cards, you'll see that, let me see if I can find an example. All the cards in the game have this requirement number, this source number that you have to meet to acknowledge the card and be able to play it or encounter it or fight it. So as the numbers go higher, you get stronger cards for you, but also nastier cards for the enemy. So again, the more story cards you add, the cooler stuff you can get, but the more danger you might be in. So here is us, our main hero, the last minstrel. And you'll see some stats here about him. He's got an item limit of 6, so he can hold 6 items himself. His armor is his armor pile. Allies that you might gain will have their own armor value. His source limit is a story pile, so he can have as many source cards as story cards that we have over here. We'll see what all that means in a second. And then his hero limit is 3, so he could get 2 more allies if I am able to find them that'll help me out and maybe be able to hold their own items. And he starts with a single item, his rusted revolver. This is a consistent weapon I can attack with, but not the strongest one, so if we get into combat, we'll see that I'll want to get some other options to deal with enemies. And then to finish up setup, we're going to start with this crumbling tower that we're investigating. So these are place cards, which you move in between. And usually they get placed in a circle, as you'll see pretty soon. But for this one, there's a specific location with multiple rooms, so they all get placed together in the direction of the arrows. And one more thing before we start, whenever a card gets added to the story deck, I also get to add the top card of the deck face down to my armor pile. And this is basically my life. If I ever go down to 0 armor when I start a turn, then I lose the game. I get cycled back into the deck and my story is over. Now, with all these things set up, I just shuffle the deck, which I've already done, and everything else will come from the deck, everything else you experience. There's no more setup beyond this to start your first game. Now, a turn takes place over the course of 8 little phases that are all mandatory. So first I'll move to a place card. I do have to move every turn. Then I can flip up any item cards I've used. That won't happen for a little while. I follow any place card rules, if there are any. I draw 1 card for each hero and either move it to my hand or source pile. We'll see what that means in a second. I draw an action card for each hero and I acknowledge or ignore it. And then I fight any enemies I might have found. Now, it sounds like a lot of steps, but it actually all goes incredibly quickly and simply. So step 1, I move to an adjacent place card. Now, for the beginning of the game, I have to just go to the bottom of the tower. Later on, I'll have some options in which direction I go. If I had any item cards flipped face down, like my revolver, I could flip them face up, but I don't. Next, I resolve any special text of the location, but this one just has some reminders about the rules. When it's in bold like that, it's not actually a special text, so there are no special rules for the entrance to the crumbling tower. All right, so now I draw 1 card for each hero I have, which right now is only 1. And I have a choice for this card. I can either put it in my source, and the maximum number of cards I can have in my source are the number of story cards I have, so I could have 1 card in my source right now. And you can think of this as kind of like your bank, your money. You can pay cards to get things to happen to you, to encounter different things, find different items, and buy them. My other option is to flip it face up and put it in my hand, and cards in my hand can never hurt me. They're just things that are kind of waiting for me to purchase them once I get enough cards in my source to do so. So in general, I like to keep my source pretty full, so I'm going to go ahead and put that and get my max of 1 source card, because I have 1 story card right now. Next, I draw 1 card for each hero again, but this time these are action cards that I must flip over. Now, most cards would have a source cost up here that would mean whether it's acknowledged. And for enemies that I face, that determines whether they attack me or not. So right now I have a single story card. So if I fought an enemy that had a 1 value here, he would attack me. If he had a 2 or more, he would not. Because again, they have to be equal or less than the number of cards I have in my story. But there's a spell song, some of the magic I can get. It has no cost. And it says, this card may be used and cycled. That just means going to the bottom of the deck for free at any time from the hand or action pile. It's in the action pile, so I can cast this song for free this turn. Otherwise, it'll go away either way. Okay, it says, flip all face down cards in the source pile face up, and flip all face up cards in the source pile face down. All right, so I'll use this. It doesn't do very much. But all it means is that my source cards will be face up. Now, they still count as source cards for me to buy stuff with. But sometimes cards you need will actually end up in your armor pile or your source pile. So you have a lot of cards like this that let you kind of search through them and see if you're missing something you need to progress in your quest. So here I have the 3rd of 3 rooms in the town, the item shop, sitting in my source pile. Again, knowing that isn't going to really help me at all, but it could have been important if, again, a vital item was hiding in my source pile. In general, whenever you use a card, except for reusable items like your gun there, you're going to cycle it to the bottom of the deck. That's just usually what happens with things. Okay, finally, I would acknowledge any other cards in my action pile, but I don't have any, and then I would fight any enemies if I had any to fight. So that's it. That was an entire turn. Pretty quick, pretty simple. All right, so start of the next turn, I'm going to go ahead and move to the staircase of the crumbling tower. Then I would flip some item cards over, but I haven't used any yet. And this time the place does have special text. When visiting this place for the first time, search the deck for every place card with a numerical source cost of 3 or less and move them into play. And then when leaving this place for the first time, this will become a story card in my story pile. So I'm going to gain a 2nd story card. So I looked through the deck and found the 4 place cards that have a source cost of 3 in them. I'm just going to randomly put them in a circle of places. And this is how place cards tend to go. They kind of like circle up and you can go left or right, except when you have, again, these special rooms like this one. So we'll get to what those other places do. Those come in for free because of the power of the tower, but usually I would have had to pay 3 source to actually put them into play after they were acknowledged. Okay, now I draw 1 card per hero. I could put it in my source, but remember I only have 1 story card in my story pile, so I can only have 1 source card. So this one I have to put face up in my hand. Okay, now this is an enemy who has a 4 source cost, so he would be acknowledged and attack me if I had 4 cards or more in my story pile. But in my hand, he's safe. He just kind of hangs out, and I just can hang on to him, and some things even let me spend him for special bonuses and that kind of thing. Okay, now we draw a card for the action pile, and it is the Forest, which has a 7 source cost, way more than the 1 story card I currently have, so that just gets cycled immediately. It is not acknowledged, so I can't buy it or hang on to it in any way when it's in the action pile. Alright, now enemies to fight, so going into another turn. So I pretty much have to move to the top of the tower now, which means this place card immediately joins my first story card. Now I have 2 story cards, which means I'll acknowledge any card that costs 2 or less. And don't forget, every time I get a new story card, I gain a new armor card as well, so I now have basically 2 life to keep me alive. And the tower is crumbling, so we're going to move this down to actually join the other place. So now we kind of have 5 cards in a sort of pentagon-shaped thing here. Okay, now we're in the treasury. When visiting this place for the first time, search the deck or hand for any item with broke string loot in the card name. If the card is found, you may move it to the item pile. So I'm going to get this loot for free, giving me my my magical music like I'm supposed to have. Then when leaving this place for the first time, move this place card into the story pile and move the hero back to the entrance. So the tower is going to finish, tower's going to finish crumbling completely. I'll be back here, but I'll have 3 cards in my story pile in a moment. And here's the broke string loot. Again, it would have needed 2 story cards to acknowledge it and 2 source to buy it, but I'm getting it for free. And this is cool. You saw a moment ago that I had that spell song that had to be cycled after I cast the spell, but this lets you attach a spell song to it, and you can just flip this over once per turn to use that spell song over and over again. So it kind of helps you to keep the magic of the music in your head. Going over to my hero, this will be my 2nd item out of a possible 6. Okay, I'm going to draw another card. It can go in my source pile or in my hand to join my enemy. I now have 2 story cards, so I'm going to put it to give myself a 2nd source. And don't forget, they usually go face down. This is only face up because of that song I cast. Now I draw 1 card from my action pile. And so this is acknowledged. I have at least 1 story card. I can buy a striped veggie for 1 source card. And that's an item. It doesn't do anything by itself, but a lot of cards will interact with it. It's a pretty angry looking veggie right there. So I'm not sure if I'll need it, but hey, I have the source to spend, so, I don't know what that is, but I guess I know what the town is, so I'll keep that for now. So this gets cycled just like anything else. I'm spending 1 to get the item card. It's becoming my 3rd item, along with my loot and my pistol. Alright, with no enemies to fight, it's another turn. I have to leave the crumbling tower. This becomes a 3rd story card for me. And I also get a 3rd armor card, because every time you get a story, you get an armor. And now I have these 5 place cards to wander around, each with their own little special abilities, until I can add more or progress the quest in some way. But first, I am going to add a card to my source pile. That'll give me 2 cards after I just spent 1 for the veggie last turn. And then for my action pile... Alright, so a really terrible item eater monster, but he has 7 costs, so he is not acknowledged, cycled immediately, nothing to worry about. Okay, so looking for my options for next turn, I've got the Lonely Shore. When visiting this place, if the amount of cards in the story pile is greater than your armor pile, you can draw 1 armor card, so that's basically a healing place. It says there's the sound of a pointless rain flickering against wet pebbles and the retreat of crestfallen waves. Sounds super cheery. And then over here, the remains of a library, scattered pages and moldy tomes lost in stacks and shadow. When visiting this place for the first time, search the deck from the bottom until a spell song card is found. Move it into your hand. Oh, that's great. So I'm definitely going to move over there to get a free song, and I can put that on my loot, remember, to give it a reusable effect. So I search from the bottom. Oh, and I should have realized because I cycled it, I'm going to get back that yellow song. I don't really want this one, though. That's the one that just shows me what's in my source pile. I would love to have like an attacking spell or a healing spell instead. But it is okay. I can put it under my loot and use it over and over, but I can always replace this with another spell song if I cycle this spell song. So I don't have to like keep this yellow song on here forever if I don't want to. All right, I guess I'll go and make my source pile the max of 3, then I'll start adding cards in my hand. And for my action draw, Lifestone that I can't afford. 7 is way more than my 3 story. Let's see, my next option is the Field of Fog. Damp and cold and filled with horrors, a maze made by uncertainty. When visiting this place, enemy cards in the action pile with source costs of 3 or less are ignored. Oh, that's great! So it's foggy enough that I can't be attacked by enemy with a source cost of 3 or less, and with me only having 3 story cards, that means I'm basically immune to monsters while I'm here, so I might come back to here a lot. Okay, now I cannot add another card to my source pile. I already have my maximum of 3, so I'm going to add this to my hand. Let's see, it is the Brummis. The first signs of northern wind can be marked upon the Brummis, where grass is yellow and cracks underfoot. So this is a place. Now, I don't have enough story cards to acknowledge it yet. Remember, I have 3, and this is a 4. But since it's in my hand, it can hang out until I gain another story card, and that'll allow me to put it into play. Okay, when visiting this place, all numbers on all cards not in the action pile are reduced by half until the end of turn. And that's kind of cool, because that could actually let me play cards from my hand more cheaply, because these card numbers would be reduced by half as well. But when visiting this place, all armor piles and armor numbers not in action pile are considered reduced by half as well. Oh, so I can die more easily, even though it makes it easier to get cards into play. So, interesting thing to consider playing if I get a 4th story card. Next, let's see our action pile. A conch shell that I can't afford, 7. Okay, my last location option that I haven't been to. Nothing grew here and nothing lived except for seeds and souls passing through on curious winds. So there's the Barrens. Cards are not drawn for each hero when visiting this place. So it means I don't get more cards in my source pile, and I also don't get cards in my hand. But it also says enemy cards in the action pile are cycled, so I also can't be attacked. So if I bounce back and forth between these places, which you sometimes end up doing until you kind of progress things, then I pretty much can't be hurt right now. So that seems pretty good. So I'm not going to get a source card or a hand card, just an action card. And it's a folk that I can't acknowledge, so that'll be the end of that turn. Now I'll move back here. I will get a hand card. Another enemy that'll just sit there for now. And my action card. Ah, there we go. I knew something would move things forward. Okay, so this one says, some of the treasure one finds is not treasure at all. Many times a minstrel has found a bag of coins or a cracked violin only to have to burn or drown them. The revolver is one such item. At night he can hear it whisper, and even in daylight the handle is chilled to the bone. Still, one haunted weapon is better than nothing at all. And by the way, this is the example of how I kind of love the story in this game, and how it's sort of specific, but also lets you fill in a lot of the gaps. I just love the idea that I have like this haunted pistol, but it's the only thing keeping me alive in this cursed world. Okay, so when this card is moved into play, search the deck for all story cards. For every 3 source cards I cycle, you can move 1 card found in this manner into your hand. So I can get another story card, and I've got 3 source cards right now, so I can actually put it into play. So this is my 4th story card, but if I spend all of my source, I can get another story card of my choice. So looking through, this is the story I'm going to add. This looks like it might be a song, but I won't sing it. Never summer, never winter, spring and autumn only remembered. All that's left is a damp day and a chill night. These are the Highlands. These are gray skies and dangerous nights. Okay, so this one has a power that stays in play until I get a new story card. And it says that at the beginning of every turn, I get to draw an additional card. So I'll get 2 cards to put in my source pile or my hand instead of 1. That's all good for me. That'll get me back my source, because right now I'm going to be poor, down to 0. And it'll get me more cards in my hand to potentially get me the things I need to get further in my quest. So this will become my 5th story card. I've gone from 3 to 5. But don't forget, that makes me in more danger. Now monsters up to level 5 could attack me and totally wreck me, because all I have is my revolver. But on the positive side, I do have 5 cards in my armor now, so that'll help a little bit. Don't forget, I do have to cycle all 3 of my source cards to get this 5th story card, so I have nothing at the moment. And I realize in explaining all of that, I forget if I was drawing for my hand or my... I think that was my action draw, so we're just going to say that is and move on to my next turn. Alright, so this place will protect me from enemies, which I need right now because I have nothing in my source. And then I'm going to get 2 cards in my source, absolutely. And I'll draw an action card. Another veggie. I know there are like allies and things you can get, and they like vegetables sometimes, but I already have one. Sure, why not? I'll spend one of my 2 source to get a second veggie. Look, this guy's grumpy too. These just are not happy vegetables in this post-apocalyptic fantasy world. Oh, crud, I just forgot that I don't get cards when I visit there, so I could not have gotten those 2 source cards, which means I could not have gotten the veggie. Alright, so we'll shuffle him back in. Oh no, I guess the veggie would have been there. Well, that's okay. He would have been cycled anyway, because I couldn't have afforded him. So yeah, I don't want to go here anymore. I need to get some more source cards. So I'll go back here to the Field of Fog. I get 2 source cards, and... Victim Ring for 7. Still can't afford it, although much closer now with my 5 story. Alright, so I want to get source cards, so I think I'm going to jump back and forth between the library and the Field of Fog, because again, the Field of Fog offers me a little bit of protection. So I'll get 2 more source cards, back almost up to my 5 max. I do an action card, a place that I could actually acknowledge, but I don't have 5 source to pay for. But this is an Ostrich Express station. The quickest way across the Highlands was Mechanical Bird, the rustiest leg still ran faster than a tired minstrel. So these are cool. There are multiple of them, and if you get them, you can travel from place to place much more quickly. But I don't have 5 source to actually pay for, even though I can't acknowledge it, so I still have to cycle it anyway. If it was in my hand, I could hang on to it, but alas, I can't. And oh, speaking of, I can actually put down this Brummus place now, and that would make things cost half as much. So if I was on the Brummus, I could have gotten that place with the story cards I have. I mean, the source cards I have. But for now, I'm a little bit worried about getting attacked, and that actually makes it easier for me to die. So unless I have another weapon, I don't think I want to play this from my hand yet. All right, another turn. I'm going to go back up to the Field of Fog. I will add 1 source card to get to my max of 5, and then I'll add 1 to my hand. Wow, I keep on adding the enemies to my hand, which is much better than them attacking me. And my 1 action card. Oh, the forest again. And That is an important place. I won't tell you why yet, but it definitely comes up later. So that's the end of that turn. I'll jump back to the library where I have no protection, get 2 hand cards. A giant enemy and a copper rose I can't afford to play yet. My action card is, oh, a cockatrice. And these are fun, by the way. I didn't show you, but besides the fun drawings of the enemies, they have little notes as though some observer has cataloged things about them. All right, so I am getting attacked by this guy. I have 5 story cards, so he's going to attack me. And initiative is determined by my source pile versus his value. So if I equal or exceed it, and luckily I do, I have 5 cards, I get to attack first. Otherwise, he would get to attack first. So he's got an ability. If the enemy attacks first, the hero pile may not attack this turn, which makes sense. Cockatrices can freeze you, I think turn you to stone. You got a prize and a penalty. Armor 4, my weapon's going to give me the chance to do some damage. If I do at least 4, I will defeat him and get the prize. Otherwise, he'll hit me for 2, and I'll get the penalty. So I've been walking around with this rusted revolver, cursed and whispering to me, but now it's going to become useful. I can flip it face down to cut the deck, and whatever the source cost, the cards in the upper left-hand corner is, that's how much damage I do. So I'm going to do this. Let's see if we can get a 4 or more. Yes! So we did 6 damage with our revolver. And that means now these guys, when you defeat them, they go to your hand. If you don't defeat them, they get cycled. Because remember, monsters in your hand can be spent for things and basically just kind of hang out, not threatening you. Additionally, I get the prize of drawing 1 extra card. Here I'm going to draw... oh, a folk. They say it was the bard named Penny Haggard who raised the first alarm, the first cry of war against the black sky and bitter cold. Okay, so folk cards are interesting. They still need to be acknowledged, but they can get played for free, so I can put this guy on my place, and now I can visit him whenever I go here. And they have different abilities, so let's see. When visiting attached place, you may cycle an item with the word veggie in it. I got a couple of those. To move this card to your item pile, and it becomes a pretty ribbon. Cycle this to use it. Move any folk card attached to the place you're visiting to the hero pile. Oh, cool. So I'm going to give this guy my 1 veggie, because remember I incorrectly got the other one. He's going to give me his pretty ribbon, and I can trade that later to a folk to make them come with me on my journey, basically give them a gift. So that's going to hang out as my 4th item. This gets cycled. And yeah, that means that if I can visit somebody else later on, I'll be able to get them to join me, which is great, because more heroes, they do put you in more danger because you're drawing more cards every turn that could attack you, but you also get more cards, you can have more source cards, you can give them a second weapon and kind of fight together. So more heroes, kind of like the greater story cards, makes the game more dangerous, but also accelerates your progress and makes it more exciting. All right, so we are going to stop there. I know it's only a taste of the game, but I'm glad you got to see a little bit of combat. You got to see how items can work, how attacking works, how spells work. I don't want to show you any more because discovering in this really thick deck all the different fun stories and locations and ways you can progress to the second deck, which has its own entirely different mechanics and story and new people to gain and new items, and I'm excited to see the third deck once it comes out. I think all of that is best experience for yourself. So you've seen what the game plays like, you've seen how it looks. If you like the look at it, I'll again put a link to the place where you can get a copy in the video notes. But besides that, this was Spell Saga. Hope you enjoyed it. Good gaming, and we'll see you at the next stop.